Are you here to improve your investment strategies? Are you looking for that one article that could help you finalize that decision you were holding off? Well then, get ready to learn more and gain just that subtle extra knowledge to get an edge in the investment business. Because if you're new here, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to The Daily Fortune, a channel where we talk about all the latest news, updates, guides, and strategies related to investment. Of course, with that said, we're going to be discussing a lot about the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, The Big Short, Michael Burry, the money tree Cathie Woods, Tesla's very own CEO and eccentric billionaire Elon Musk, along with the rest of the big leagues to learn just a bit more from the professionals. And don't worry, of course we talk about crypto, and we also talk about the best stocks to invest in, along with many tips and tricks on how to handle your finances so you never lose. So before we talk about making money, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell as well to make sure you won't miss a single video. Now let's get started. Let me share this big news with you. Warren Buffett has literally put a lot of Berkshire Hathaway's extra cash into the market in Q1. Berkshire Hathaway's bond fund declined by around $40 billion in Q1, from over $144 billion to just $103 billion by the end of it. Buffett bought and increased 6 positions in the Q1, according to Buffett's meeting. So let's begin with the one that's been getting the most attention, which is actually quite interesting. Buffett was investing into Activision Blizzard in Q1, so he purchased around $4.7 billion worth of Activision stock to add to either Ted or Todd's pre-existing $1 billion holding. If you think Buffett has gone insane here, well, he's not. It's not that he's suddenly obsessed with video game firms. There is a real reason behind why Buffett decided to boost Berkshire's investment to 9.7% of the firm. In an interview, he stated that
then on January, 17th or 18th, Microsoft announced they were going to buy Activision for $95 a share. Now, when they announced that, at that point, Activision becomes a different kind of security. It becomes what Charlie and I used to we call them workouts or something like that, and they become known as arbitrage. Well, they're not really arbitrage, but they're securities, they're, in this case, common stock, whose value depends not on what the market price does, but whether a given corporate event occurs. An announced corporate event occurs.
He's only buying the stock in the belief that the Microsoft acquisition will go through. Because if it does, and it goes forward at $95 per share, Buffett will profit from the difference between $95 per share and whatever stock price he paid for it.
Microsoft wants to buy Activision, we'll say. Well, they said at $95 a share. And they've got the money. January, whatever it was, 17th, 18th, 19th, Microsoft announces it. The stock, which had been in the 60s, went up to the 81 or 2. And that looked like not a big enough spread to me for a few days. And then it settled back a little. So anyway, we now own 9.5% of Activision. And if we went over 10%, we would file a report. It is my purchases, not the manager who bought it some months ago. If the deal goes through, we make some money, and if the deal doesn't go through, who knows what happens.
That's the backstory behind Warren Buffett's $4.7 billion investment in Activision Blizzard. He's simply betting on the fact that the deal will go through, and that's all there is to it. When it comes to the second purchase of the quarter, he acquired additional Apple stock. Buffett didn't talk about it in detail, but he did address it.
And we actually bought a little more Apple in the first quarter, so we decided we wanted to own a greater interest. And on top of that, we knew that we would own an even greater interest if they kept buying in their shares.
So nothing new there, but there are 2 things we can definitely conclude from that. The first is that Buffett is okay with Apple's present valuation, and undoubtedly he likes the buybacks. But there's nothing to get too excited about. Berkshire's Apple investment, for example, was worth $161.2 billion at the end of Q4 and $159.1 billion at the end of Q1. And Apple shares lost 1.67% in Q1, bringing the $161.2 billion investment down to $158.5 billion, leaving barely a $600 million difference between what the position was worth at the end of Q1 and what it's worth now. Now let's move on to Buffett's greatest investment in Chevron in the Q1 of 2022. This is intriguing because it was a significant purchase for Buffett, even though it was never mentioned during the shareholder meeting. But it's fascinating because Berkshire's holding was worth $4.5 billion at the end of Q4 last year, but it's now worth a huge $25.9 billion 3 months later. Also, during the Berkshire meeting, Buffett showed this interesting slide that revealed how much money he put into the market at various points in time in Q1. You can see here, the majority of the money flowed into the market between February 21st and March 15, indicating that much of that Chevron buying was likely due to such a large position. During that time period, a large portion of that money was invested in Chevron. The funny part is that if you check the Chevron stock price chart throughout that time period, it looks quite remarkable since the stock climbed around 20%. That's amazing. That's an excellent marketing timing for Buffett. But there's more to it, because if Buffett had invested $15 billion of his around $20 billion Chevron investment during that time period, at the time's market cap, he would have owned nearly 6% of the company. Now, it's not entirely Berkshire because Chevron released their annual report around the same time, which would have resulted in an increase in trading volume. But it's fascinating that Berkshire would have had a part in bringing the Chevron stock price higher during that time frame. Buffett is clearly fond of US oil and gas companies at the moment, because in addition to Chevron, another stock he purchased in Q1 was Occidental Petroleum. The interesting part about Buffett's discussion of Occidental Petroleum during the Berkshire meeting is that he was able to buy 14% of the company in just 2 weeks, on top of about 40% of the company's shares being held off. The main reason for this, as we'll see, is the stock market's current trend of increasing levels of speculation and betting in the short term, which drives up daily trade volumes.
Shows how we bought 14% of Occidental Petroleum. And you'll say, well, how can you buy 14% of a company in 2 weeks? And it's more extreme than that. Because if you look at the Occidental proxy, you'll see the standard names, index funds. They own 40% of the company, roughly. And they didn't do anything during this period. So now you're down to 60% of the Occidental Petroleum company that's even available for sale. And I go in and tell Mark Millard, this fellow that is 30 feet away from me or so, and I say in the morning to him, buy 20% and take blocks or whatever it may be. And in 2 weeks, he buys 14% out of 60%. That's not investment. People were buying and selling like 3-day calls or 2-day calls. And the more times people pull the handle on the machine, the more money the machine makes. I mean, it's very clear. And overwhelmingly, I mean, where did people go? The investors just were sitting around, and there weren't very many, and the money was being made essentially by a bunch of people gambling on things. And it defies anything that Charlie and I have seen, and we've seen a lot, but I've never seen that percentage of the American public. Essentially, it was a gambling parlor.
In a strange way, Berkshire has to thank the traders and speculators who have flooded the market in recent years, increasing daily trading volumes and allowing a large corporation like Berkshire to make a significant investment in a company like Occidental Petroleum in less than 2 weeks. It's a little ridiculous, to be honest. And so that's the latest news on Warren Buffett's Occidental Petroleum position. Now let's move on to the next stock he purchased. It's none other than HP. Buffett purchased nearly $4.2 billion worth of HP stock during the quarter, but he didn't mention it at all during the Berkshire meeting as well. However, because HP is a large established company, it may be a very simple investment for Warren Buffett, because it's currently very cheap, trading at a P/E of about 6.5, and at the same time, management is very focused on purchasing back a number of their shares that we all know Warren Buffett loves. So I believe that over the past 4 quarters, HP has bought back about $1.5 billion worth of stock in every single quarter. It's certainly not the craziest or most complicated investment Buffett has ever made. It probably just makes sense on paper, which is why he chose to go ahead and do it. But it's still nothing huge. I know it's weird to suggest that $4.2 billion is nothing huge, but it is in Berkshire's situation. The last stock that Buffett purchased in Q1 was Allegheny. It's an insurance firm. You may already know about this one because Berkshire revealed that they were going to acquire Allegheny for $11.6 billion a few months ago. So let's watch what Warren Buffett stated in the shareholder meeting about how the acquisition came about.
February 25th, I got a email, just a few lines long, from a fellow that was a friend of mine that worked for Berkshire many years ago. And he said he'd now become CEO of Allegheny Corp. I'd been following Allegheny Corp for 60 years. I'd read their annual reports. I had 4 big file drawers full of it because it was an interesting company. And so Joe said, this is my first annual report as CEO, and I just wanted to send it along to you. And I sent a note back to Joe, and I said, I'm going to read it. I look forward to reading it. And I said, by the way, I'm going to be in New York on March 7th, and can we get together? I'd like to see you. So that's the orderly and decision-making progress. I didn't call up investment bankers and say, will you prepare me a report on this, and what's your advice and all this stuff. I knew we'd buy Allegheny at the price we offered, and if it was of interest to Allegheny, fine. If it wasn't, but otherwise, if that email hadn't been sent, we would not have made an offer for Allegheny.
So now you already know how Buffett acquired or is set to acquire Allegheny. Anyways, these are the 6 stocks we know Warren Buffett bought in the first quarter of 2022. But we'll have to wait until his 13F filing, which is a few weeks away, to see the full image, which will be presented to us. And that's all for today's video. Thank you for watching. So that's it for today. I hope you learned something from today's video. And to get updated with the next videos, don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you next time.